Welcome to the Channel 99 Review Public Access Television, Channel 27, Albuquerque, New Mexico. My name is Mike Rivas. This is the Men's Forum. This is a call-in program. We'd like to encourage our viewers to call in with questions or comments at 292-3263. We've kind of instituted a beginning tradition here in which we thank all of our production people and support staff right up front. So I would like to thank producer Mike Kruchowski, our director Dusty Arrington, our cameraman Tim Johnson, our floor director Ann Reiner, and our technical director Joe Heafy, a whole bunch for helping make this program possible through their volunteer efforts. We have some key program segments for you today. We have of course, our guest is Mr. Mark Ferriegel, who is our feature person, and I'll get back a little bit more on Mark in a moment. We also have a producer's commentary that will cover our plans for Father's Day program upcoming. We have a book review series worth reading, and an ongoing parenting section called For Our Children, which is a series featuring tips on raising kids and young people. Our guest today is Mark Ferriegel, as I mentioned earlier. Welcome, Mark.
Glad to be here.
Good to see you. Mark is a registered art therapist. He has a master's in art education. He has a bachelor of university studies with a focus on psychology and education, and has done a tremendous amount of work as a counselor with a lot of problems that affect families. One of those, some of those have to deal with things like incest, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and has worked for a number of New Mexico organizations that you're probably familiar with, such as Parents United, Bright Horizons, Hogaris, Vista Sandia, and others. He's at the present time involved, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today, with a program called Image Seminars. It's a nonprofit educational organization studying archetypal psychology as developed by Mr. James Hillman. He works with a couple of pretty fine fellows. One I've met for sure, Mr. Howard McConaughey and Mr. Paul Jinks. And these workshops are in archetypal art and mythopoetic imagery. And they kind of deal with engendering the masculine, and a lot of it is art-based, having to do with mask making. So, hi.
Hi.
Good to see you. That was a whole bunch to get out, but I'm glad we finally did. Would you like to say some things about what you're trying to do with the workshop and some of the directions you're trying to take with them?
Our main focus again is the mythopoetic approach. What that means is we study myth, folklore, fairy tale, and use it as kind of a background to explore masculinity. In this, we bring in artwork and treat it as ritual space. So in the artwork, you take and get those images out, and we explore those images through the drawing and through the artwork. From there, we kind of present that to each other and the group, and it becomes kind of a group container, if you will. We immediately ask people for their shame, in that's what we focus on mostly, is masculine shame. So what happens is a lot of shame comes out in the artwork.
Could you mention a couple of different types of shame, or some approaches and what shame might be about, so that people can understand what you were?
It's mostly, there's a hiding that happens with men. There's a hiding that happens with men around being a man. And it turns into, this hiding that goes on turns into an insecurity or a fear. And a lot of times it's sexual. Often it's not uncommon that we have sexual shame coming out in the artwork. Shame around relationships is a common theme that comes out. Shame around isolation and loneliness is another one that often comes out. And with this shame usually comes fear. A whole lot of fear, the fear of sharing that, of coming out to a group of men and saying, I feel a lot of shame around this issue. It's embarrassing. Not real sure that other men share the same feelings. So those are some of the more common ones.
I noticed you mentioned in our phone conversation, you were talking about absent father shame
Yes,
and
yes.
Oprah Winfrey kind of shame
Yes.
where men carry women's emotional burdens for them, which is
Yes.
one of the things Bly looks at
Yes.
a whole lot.
Well, part of that shame comes from, the way I see it is, there's a body shame that happens, and it's almost at a nonverbal level. And what I think that is a lacking. I was thinking about those times around our father, whether something was being said or not, and how did he smell when he worked? What was it like to stand next to him? It's almost like radiation or sunlight. We absorb it. When Dad's not there, that isn't there. We don't know how to be male in our bodies. Oftentimes, we go to Mom. How do I be in this body? And if we do the way Mom knows how to be in her woman body. And if we go to her and say, show me how to be in this male body, she can't tell us. The other thing is there's some part of us that knows that the moment we do that, something dies. So what happens is we end up being what James Hillman would call the puer returnus. We end up being disembodied males. We can get into our head, and we can get into our ideals, and we can even get into spirituality, and we can fly 100 miles above the earth. But we don't know how to be here on the ground with our male bodies. And that comes from just being next to Dad. And most of us in today's culture have absent fathers. Either he's absent through work, he's absent through divorce, he's absent through alcohol, or he's just absent from his own body.
Emotionally.
Emotionally, he's
Sure.
absent.
Sure.
So we men are having a real hard time not trying to learn how to get into our bodies and be male within that body. So in that emptiness, when I say, what is a man, and I'm trying to find it in my body, I don't find much. And that turns into shame. Especially when you have some very angry people saying, this is what men are, and this is what men are, and this is what men are. When I go to check it out, it's like, well, I don't have an argument here.
Uh-huh.
So we tend to take in that shame. We tend to take in the shame of, if we're trying to be sensitive men, and we're trying to be sensitive to women's issues and their pain, there's a real tendency to, if I'm going to be sensitive, well, then I need to open myself up to this other person. And if some of that male anger comes in, this happened to me in my 3 years at the shelter, and it almost killed me. I'm trying to be a sensitive male. So that means I need to take in everything that's said about men. And there's a lot of appropriate anger at the shelter, at the battered women's shelter. A lot of appropriate anger. So I'm here taking on, the abuser, the rapist. I'm taking on what men are doing. And that kind of taking on is deadly for a man. We don't, and many of what Bly calls the soft male or the gentle male, that's all he knows how to do.
Naive male.
The naive male,
Right.
the Peter Pans, if you will, too. Or the puer eternus, is keep taking in these attacks and not having any kind of
Armor.
breastplate, anything to stop that kind of attack.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's important to realize that women really are justified in a tremendous amount of the approaches that they're, just trying to get. I was listening to a Bly tape this morning. He was talking about the fact that the society almost has it set up so that women have to be poor if they're single, and dealing with that, is an issue that I really think that the attempts women have made at getting perspective on who they are has been tremendously beneficial in helping us get you know, a little bit of an insight into who we are and where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do as men, you know, because we've had to question ourselves. But on the other, I also believe one of the things you're saying is that there are certain things that women have to carry for themselves. And one of the things that Bly talked about was the fact that because that men have been in situations where fathers were emotionally absent or mentally absent or addictively absent, there was no one in a lot of our earlier lives, you know, when our generation were children, there was no one there to carry the emotional weight. And so these young men have carried that, and now then as adults, they're trying to get their childhood back. So it's real hard for them to be in down-to-earth relationships with women. And men, women bring you down into this world out of your head. You know, I mean, if you want to get your feet on the ground, I mean, you know, women are, you know, 100% serious. And you know, I think it's important to through these kinds of things begin to define, you know, what is legitimately ours to carry and what is theirs to carry. Mr. Lionel Corbett, who was on the show, was pointing out that a lot of that blame and stuff that comes down is just, you know, a lot of it is justified anger, but for us to pick it up and carry it's kind of a mistake. And, you know, you can't, you know, you can't save the world and you can't be responsible for stuff you didn't do, you know. So, you know, I think trying to draw that line and let them begin to carry some of the things that are theirs, you know, which makes a healthy relationship. Each person has a life, kind of.
Which is what relationship can bring, is that kind of.
Right. You know, we talked about you maybe playing the drum a little bit and telling the first part of the Jack and the Beanstalk story in the first part of our discussion. Would you do that for us and just take a second? I think fairy tales are a real important part, and myth is a real important part of the mythopoetic movement. And so get on with it. Just do that.
This is one of the tales of masculine initiation. You can find it in Grimm's version. It's there. I'm going to talk up to a certain point, or I want to tell the story up to a certain point.
To where the beanstalk sprouts.
Where the beanstalk sprouts. And we'll talk a little bit about that and about the initiation that's going on here. I get excited and drum more than my story, so I'm going to have to...
Well...
long time ago, back when time was not what it is now, when hours were seconds, and seconds were hours, there was a boy named Jack. Now, Jack lived with his mother. And being without a father, Jack was very poor. And one day, Jack's mother said to Jack, "We have to eat. Take the cow into town and sell her so that we can buy some food." Jack did this. And on his way into town, he met an old man. The old man said, "Boy, where are you taking that cow, and what for?" Jack said, "I'm taking it into town so that I can sell it, so that my mother and I may have some money to eat." The old man said, "Boy, I have something here worth far more than money, and I would gladly trade you for it." When he opened his hands, there were 3 beans. And the old man said, "They're magic beans." Jack, seeing that they were magic beans, took the beans and returned home. And when he got there, and his mom stood at the door anticipating the money he might have gotten from that cow, and she saw the beans, she threw a fit and threw the beans.
Threw the beans out the window, huh?
Threw the beans out the window.
And during the night, what happened, of course?
The beanstalk grew.
Okay. Well, let's start from the beginning of the fairy tale. We have a young boy living with his mom. Let's talk about it.
Tale starts out, as most fairy tales do, they tell you right away what the problem is about. Problem here is a boy who lives with his mother without a father. So we know what fairy tales, you have to watch for what they don't tell you also. What this one doesn't tell you is that Jack is going to seek his father. He's going to look for some kind of fathering. He's got mom. She's right here in the house with him. She sends him out, as most loving mothers do, with get a job, go to school, the kind of stuff that mom tells us to do. Make sure you got insurance. Be safe. You need to make some money here. He goes out to make money with the cow. And on the way, he finds this old man. Back in times when men were initiated, it was the old man who did the initiating. And this in the tale is kind of a sign that there's going to be an initiation going on here. Not only that, he offers something magical. And you got to hear that in the tale when it moves. Transition in the tale is right there where the old man says, "These are magic." Jack sees that they're magic. He sees their magic. So this older male has given him some kind of magic that can be, you're 16 years old and you see Picasso, and you see the magic in Picasso. There's the magic beans. So Jack goes home and he says, "Mom, look at this magic that I found." And Mom, doing her job, takes those beans and she throws it out. And we've all had this happen, maybe 18, maybe 20, maybe 16. When Mom says, I can't take your daydreaming, I can't take your idealism, I can't take you being out all night, I can't take this stuff that you're doing that I don't understand, and she throws us out. Mothers that have thrown us out are some of the most loving people in the world, because we usually won't leave unless Mom picks us up by the scuff in some way and says, "Out, I've had enough of this." And she does it. And what she threw out, what Mom threw out later, became this giant beanstalk. Which Jack climbs, as any of us would, hopefully. He climbs the beanstalk, he gets up there, and he starts taking gold from this giant. That giant could be anybody. It could be going to the university. It could be any kind of endeavor where you start touching into ritual or sacred space. This is not of this world. He has to climb to get there. He has to work real hard to get there. Tale tells us this is not of this world.
So he begins his journey to manhood.
Begins his journey to
lay
manhood.
the boy to rest and let the man come into being.
Exactly. But he doesn't get it right away. He gets the gold, which is another way of hearing spiritual gold. He gets this spiritual gold, illumination, if you will. Comes back down the beanstalk, goes back to Mom. Now, we got to be careful not to get too literal here. Mom might be the wife. Say our wives are carrying all of our mom energy now. Come back and we say, "Ooh, look at this gold." Well, in the tale, Mom spends the gold right away. She just goes out. The bag of gold is the first thing he comes down with. Then he comes down with the goose. Mom says, "Well, let's open it up and get all the eggs out." So here he has a life supply of something that will give him spiritual gold. Mom, another way of hearing that is when that little boy in us gets a hold of that spiritual gold. We go out into the world and try to buy a mom with it. We could call that our addictive behavior, our consumerism. But we hand the spiritual gold over to something else. The last is the harp. And in the harp cries out as he's stealing it and wakes the giant. And that's at that point where what we know about the world and what we know about ourselves, we can't keep quiet anymore. And when we start speaking that truth, you can be sure that there's going to be a whole big giant come after you. And it could be the corporate America. It could be the job you work at, where this giant says, no, you are not going to do that.
You bet. Well, I'll tell you, we have a producer's commentary. Let me say this real quick. If you would like to call in and talk about this, we would love to hear from you. You can call us at 292-3263. And what we have now is our producer's commentary with Mike Kruchowski. It's coming right up on Mother's Day.
Hello, I'm Mike Kruchowski, producer of the Channel 99 Review. You know, Father's Day is only a few weeks away. Last year, in several cities across the nation, feminist groups staged vocal protests against child abuse on Father's Day, as if men were the only perpetrators of child abuse. I think that's a deplorable as well as misleading smear tactic, especially when one considers the constant drubbing we men take in the commercial media. For this Father's Day, I propose a more fitting celebration here in Albuquerque. On June 16th, Father's Day 1991, the Channel 99 Review's 22nd show will be cablecast live from our studio. Rather than featuring our usual one-on-one interview with a guest, I'd like to fill our studio with men and their children. This will be your chance to come tell us and Albuquerque about the special relationships you and your children are forging. It doesn't matter whether you're married, divorced, or never married, or whether you're young or old. In fact, if we can get 3 generations together, children, fathers, and grandfathers, so much the better. To help make the event even more special, I propose we plan a group picnic at a nearby park before the show. Being a parent is tough work for both women and men, and it's time to start recognizing the extraordinary efforts our parents have made in the past and are making today. Let's not let another chance to pay tribute to our city's many decent, caring, and involved fathers pass by, only to let the fanatics desecrate this occasion. If you're interested in joining us for our Father's Day show or at the picnic, please give me a call at my home at 268-5260. And if you don't have pencil and paper handy right this moment, just look for my phone number in the credits at the end of today's show. I hope you'll come join us for this special occasion and the celebration of fatherhood on Father's Day this year.
Welcome back to the Men's Forum section of the Channel 99 Review. I'd like to remind you guys, as Michael pointed out, that we have Mother's Day coming up. And it's a good time to honor your mother. And it doesn't matter if you're a divorced dad, if you're separated, if you're old or young, everybody has a mom out there. And it's a tremendous opportunity to make sure, as men, that our children know and that we know among ourselves that without moms, we wouldn't be here. So let's make it a point to make next Mother's Day not just make it a holiday of the calendar, let's make it a holiday of the heart. So we're meeting today with Mark Ferriegel. Mark does art therapy. We have some masks here, and I'd like to get into some of the workshops he does and talk about that a little bit. Mark, you deal with engendering the masculine, and you deal with shame. You guys, as I understand it, they do a 10-week program, each week being a 2-hour session in which you extract or attempt to extract these archetypal symbols or forces at work in the soul and bring it into reality. You create a mask out of that, and then you, and in the creation of that mask in a ritual space, you then create ceremony in which we learn to identify that force as it is and begin to see how it is active in our lives. So would you like to show us a mask maybe and just talk about it a little bit? Give a little bit of a background there. I think the viewers might be interested in that.
Let me talk about this character. This character is a mask that I made. He came at a time in my life when I knew how to be a very nice guy. I was an incredibly nice guy. And being nice got me mowed over. I kept, I'd come up against some real hostile energy, and I'd try to be nice with this hostile energy. So I lacked this character. I wasn't real sure what this was going to be as I started out with the mask. As you can see, the back of the mask are made out of plaster bandages. So we start off with just kind of a bandaged face.
Do you start out with like pen and ink and you draw pictures on paper and that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Is that the medium you start with?
We don't usually draw the mask work. What happens is images start coming up in the artwork.
Right.
And from there, the mask will leap from it.
So you just start out trying to. I know that Carl Jung did a lot of drawing and stuff. He has a picture of him as a. In fact, somebody was saying that they thought his archetype was probably the magus or the magician. And I saw a picture he'd done of himself as an angel. I think it was as a kind of the wise old man.
And he liked that place.
so the mask is slowly developed then out of the actual artwork of drawing and creating, and you're looking for these images that are recurrently appearing in this work that you're doing.
Well, making art is sacred space.
Right.
And what that means is you don't really know what you're going to find when you get there. And the mask work draws us into that. So the way I see it is I was not the only creator here. I mean, I had my ideas of what I wanted it to be, but it had its own ideas.
Right.
Then the next step was to find out who this character is. And the way we do that is we have everybody in the group put on a mask, as long as it's not your own.
Right.
What we tend to do when we put on our own mask is act out what we think it should be.
Okay.
When this character, great big, the first time I met this character, 6 foot, 200 pounds, big shoulders, puts this on and lets out this growl and this scream. And my heart jumps up into my throat, and it took me most of the rest of that hour to get back down. He had scared me so bad.
Right.
Later, 2 months later, I was being attacked. And in that attack, this character came up. I felt this growl developing. And I was trying to tell this person no, and this person was being real pushy. And finally, this growl, it almost sounded like a growl when I said it was, no, Well, he was right there, and I saw him as I was saying this no.
So this is getting in touch with our feelings again.
Oh, yeah.
This is getting out of the head into the body.
Exactly.
And being able to, instead of being up here flying around eternally in the sky, you actually get in and express those feelings. Yeah.
That growl came from down there, and
bet.
that's where he is down in here.
What was the mask made out of again, did you say?
We start with plaster bandages, the type that they use when you break your leg and you go into a doctor.
Right.
And we start with a real basic plaster mask. From there, the sky's the limit. Add hair, add feathers. It's unlimited what you can do with the mask from there.
Great.
As some of these masks will show.
Great. I tell you what, I'd like to remind our viewers that you can call in at 292-3263 and talk to Mark or I if you would like. Love to hear from you. We have our second tape section coming up here, which is our worth reading. It's a book review about history of the English language called The Mother Tongue, and it's by a fellow named Bill Bryson. And it probably sounds kind of dry to you, but you're going to be surprised when you hear about it. I'd like to encourage you to take a look and see what Mike's come up with.
People, you've been reading a book about the history of the English language, and the reaction of many would be, boring. Yes, we all sat through those seemingly endless high school English classes where we discussed gerunds, dangling participles, and the impact of the epic poem Beowulf on the language. A book about the English language couldn't be anything but boring, right? Not so, at least not if you're reading The Mother Tongue, English and How It Got That Way by Bill Bryson. How it got that way? From the very start, it's obvious this isn't the usual dry history of the English language. Bryson begins his book with the tales of how English is abused, misused, and generally brutalized by foreigners who just don't seem to have a knack for the language. For example, consider this announcement in a Yugoslavian hotel. The flattening of underwear with pleasure is the job of the chambermaid. Or this warning to motorists in Tokyo: when the passenger on the foot, or of the foot, heave in sight, tootle the horn. Trumpet at him melodiously at first, but if he still obstacles your passage, tootle him with vigor. Well, the Japanese may have conquered most of the Pacific and Orient during World War II, but they've never conquered the English language. We often hear how difficult English is for foreigners, with all its odd spellings, mispronunciations, and grammar rules. Bryson spreads a bit of this misconception, too, in his introductory chapter, and I beg to differ with him on only this one point. Try studying Russian, for instance, with its multitude of words for the concept to go. It's absolutely maddening. Or how about Welsh, whose spelling conventions are worse than Polish, and we all know how crazy their spellings are. However, Bryson soon gets back on track as he relates the reasons for English's very dynamic qualities and some of its crazier pronunciations and spellings. Perhaps the best short answer is simply that English has borrowed extensively from many other languages. Ever wonder why we pronounce kernel as if it's a kernel of corn spelled with an R? Looks like colonel to me. Actually, it's because of an odd twist of events which eventually gave us the worst of two worlds, so to speak. The word is derived from the old French coronel, which the French borrowed from the Italian colonnello. As Bryson put it, with inimitable illogic, we finally settled on the French pronunciation and the Italian spelling. Well, I'm glad that mystery has finally been explained to me. How about you? English has grown from a relatively obscure beginning to become a world language in a way that Esperanto could never hope to, nor Russian for that matter. Bryson points out, for instance, that when a German engineer discusses production problems with a Chinese foreman in a plant in China, they both use a language that's foreign to both of them, English. English has truly become a universal language, whether one wants to admit it or not. Consider for a moment that there are more people in China studying English as a foreign language than there are English-speaking people in the entire United States. English can be both poetically romantic and scientifically precise, and that flexibility is one reason it has made such an impact on the world today. The mother tongue is a delightful, thoroughly amusing tour through our wacky world of the English language. One reviewer put it this way: it might well have been called the mother tongue-in-cheek for its witty approach. For a look at all the fun we missed in our high school English classes, check out this book, which was just published this year. I think you'll find it's well worth reading.
Welcome back to the Men's Forum section of the Channel 99 Review. My name is Mike Rivas. I'm your host. Our guest today is Mr. Mark Ferriegel, who's an art therapist, part of does image seminars. They tell me we have a call on line 3, so let's pick up on that. Hello? Welcome. Do we have a call or yay or nay, fellas? Hello? Well, okay. We have a caller out there someplace, and we urge you to call back at 292-3263. Mark, let's talk about the Parsifal myth a little bit. Would you like to do that?
Yes, I'd love to.
That was kind of a fun. One of the things I noticed that in some of the recovery I've done is that Joseph Campbell and who is the other fellow? Robert Moore. were both real interested in the Darth Vader Star Wars program, and of course the Parsifal myth ties in with the Indiana Jones story that we saw in the motion pictures, and those things are kind of bigger than life epics that incorporated a lot of the mythopoetics. Well, I tell you what, we have a line 3 flashing. I'll bet we have a caller. Thanks for calling. Good evening.
Good evening. I just wanted to call and congratulate you on the program that you're having, and maybe ask what should a young father do today?
What should a young father do about what?
Well, in order to become a mature male, as you're talking about.
Okay, well, got some comments on that, Mark?
From my own experience as father, I think it's real important that you explore and admit that there is a part of you that would bite off your children's heads. Down deep in there is that part of us that actively hates our children. If you can own that, then you don't have to act it out. But if you are saying, if you've bought into this ideal that I'm this loving, wonderful father, and you're not aware that there's a part of you that would hurt your children, then you're going to be acting that out.
Well, that's being in the shadow, isn't it?
Precisely.
You have to look at both sides of yourself and accept,
Precisely.
That way you're not okay.
Precisely. So I would encourage you to look at the not so nice parts of parenting, the parts of us that don't have patience, the parts of us that would act out violence.
I think that's where men's groups come into play, and also like the little parenting tip that is produced for us each week by one of the family support groups here is real good in recognizing that a lot of the skills that we have or should have been lost to us. Communication has been something that we don't have, and it's a good idea to go places where we can talk about that stuff and look at it and how do you deal with situations,
The other thing, I'd like to say something here that's real important also for young fathers, is you don't have to talk with your children to radiate that father stuff to them. You're out in the yard working. Get them out there. Get them involved in what you're doing. Don't have to have conversation. Just get around them. Find ways. There was an article in the paper yesterday that said something real interesting. It was talking about a study where they realized, or what the study determined, is that what our parents did and didn't do to us didn't affect us half as much as how much they touched us and how much of that parent body we got. So as a young father, try to give your children, as of course they've been saying this for years, as many hugs as you can. If you're spending time around them, let me back off. We get caught up into this, I've got to go home and I've got to give them 15 minutes of quality time. It really puts us in a bind.
Right.
You can have them, if you're sitting there at the table reading, have them close. Just that physical closeness is going to count for something.
Right. Yeah, Blythe says it's almost molecular. It happens. It has to do with the way men feel and the way women feel. I think just making sure that youngsters are close to you and spend some time with your young fathers or old fathers. I think the proximity is real important, for the spiritual and the recognition of values and things. I'd like to thank whoever called. I hope we didn't lose you out of hand. Anyone else that would like to call in at 292-3263, certainly welcome you to. What we're kind of discussing here is the Indiana Jones, what was it, the last Crusade. The Last Crusade, which parallels the Arthurian legends of the Grail myth and the Parsifal story. But we have another caller. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, there's always been a problem that's bothered me with the parenting. I've got 3 young children,
seems like to me more of the world spends time with my kids than I do. And I wonder, I suppose, I'd like to think it makes, or my time makes a difference, but sometimes it's quite overwhelming.
I'd like to speak to that.
Right on with it, Mark.
300 years ago, you had the whole community. What's happened, this is something that men and women are, what's going on with men and women these days, is you had uncles, you had the king or the chief, you had a whole community that took responsibility for raising the children up in that community.
You had an extended family?
You got it. And it was the community's responsibility to raise the child. What's happened today is we have, because of our nuclear families and lots of other reasons, we've lost that sense of community. So today's parent is loaded down with the responsibility of the whole community. Well, it's a setup. We can't do it. You can't be king. You can't be priest. I'm speaking to the father. You can't be father. You can't be mentor. You can't be teacher. You can't be all of those. So what happens is we're overloaded. And it's a no-win scenario. So I think the best way to approach that overload, that it all falls on me, is first of all admitting that that's what's going on. I cannot give my children everything that they need, which we've tended to take on as parents. You know, we've learned as Americans, it was what was it, Beaver Cleaver show one time. Beaver's mom is going, what did I do wrong for my kids to be doing this? And Mr. Cleaver goes, stop acting like a modern parent and making it your fault that your kids are, that you're the reason that your kids are the way they are. And what that illustrates is give them what you can. And this is the point that I'm trying to make, is yeah, you have to go out and you have to make a living. She has to work and she has to make a living. Give them what you can and try to focus on fathering. Let the teachers teach. When you get a chance to teach, do that. But again, fathering is a body thing.
Right. Well, you know what this gentleman is saying is that his time is so pressed. You know, his children. It sounds to me, if I'm not mistaken, you know, my children are at school. You know, I'm working, trying to make a living, keep food on the table. How do I set aside some quality time so that I can have the input and spend the time with my children that I want to in things? What would you do? I guess you just have to make that a priority. You have to say this, you know, something has to go, turn the television set off, do something, but you have to at some point, you know, what's the old line, if nothing changes, nothing changes? So how do you get some change in there, I think is what he's asking us. How do you begin to spend some time with your kids that, and have some input?
There's another angle to this, and one is if you're always sacrificing yourself for your job, your kids, paying the bills, sacrificing for your marriage, you're one walking sacrifice. So what I would suggest is you're going to have more to give to your kids when you start giving to yourself. And what I mean by that is find a way that you can be replenished. We do it on the weekends, on Sundays. We go out to the shop and we fill ourselves back up. So part of being overwhelmed as a father is take good care of yourself. And if you're taking good care of yourself, you're gonna have some stuff, some left over to give to the kids.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, that's good enough. It sounds like it's left to hope.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You know, one of the things I did when my youngest girl was growing up, so I realized that we would just go over and we'd sit down and talk, and then we went to, I didn't have a lot of money for therapy, so, you know, for extended therapy, but we went over and just set some goals and looked at, you know, how can we spend some time together and how can we communicate, and we ended up getting a lot of things written out, you know, together so that we could kind of see where we were going, and we both, I know one of, you know, I'll just say this and then we'll try to get into Parsifal unless somebody else calls, which I hope they do at 292-3263. one of the things I was looking at was trying to set time aside for the youngster and for myself, and just not having the skills, you know, up front. I didn't get them to be able to incorporate them into our lives, and setting that time aside and making a real effort to spend it, you know, with the youngster, so that we had the communication skills to be able to talk about things. Because I'd known this person for like 16 years, and I thought, gosh, a 16-year-old is not a 40-year-old. But in my mind, you know, it's like I assumed somehow that my youngster knew a lot of things that she didn't know. And she thought that I was thinking and doing a lot of things that I wasn't. So, you know, getting that worked out and getting clear is a big deal. So you want to talk about Parsifal and Indiana Jones a little bit?
Yeah, let me talk about Indy. I'd like to talk about the last part of the movie where they go into the cave where the Grail is. They go into the cave, and already before them is this rich man who is after the Grail, this Nazi woman who is also an archaeologist, and a group of soldiers. And they're in there, and Indy and his father and his companions are back behind the rocks, and they're watching what's happening. And these heads come rolling out, and they send it out of this cave, and they send in another soldier, and these heads come rolling out. Well, pretty soon they're discovered, and Indy's got to go in, or they're discovered, and Indy's father gets shot, and he's laying there, and he's wounded, and Indy has got to go further into the Grail chamber in order to get the Grail and bring it out and heal the father. So let's do this as a kind of a backdrop of the Parsifal myth. Parsifal, the whole thread of that story is him getting stuck in the homespun, or him getting stuck in what his mother instructed him to do. So the Parsifal myth is a story about leaving the mother. Now it's taken a twist. And what we're doing now is redeeming the wounded father. Back in the Star Wars trilogy, it was redeeming the shadowy father. Darth Vader is this big shadowy. So all of a sudden...
Dark Father. Let's play on the word Dark
that's
Father.
Right, Darth Father.
Vader, Dark Father.
Oh, great. Both movies, there's a real parallel there, and that is this Nazi stuff. And the Nazis were trying to reestablish the fatherland. They had this incredible dark side of the father energy, and here it was being acted up in the world. So they're in the cave, and Indy's to save his father. Throughout the whole myth, he has no interest in the Grail. He doesn't even believe in it. He has no interest in this Grail, no belief. But he's looking for his father. He has to find his father. He has to find the Grail to find his father. So he gets there, and Dad has some hints. Dad is an expert on the Grail. And Dad has some notes that give him hints on how to get through some of the traps that are in before you get to the Grail.
So this is kind of the guide now. The father
Right.
is the guide who has
Good.
this wisdom and can be there and
Good.
say, okay, you know, you're setting off on this journey and only you can travel it, but these are some of the obstacles, and this is the way you approach it.
Our fathers have told us what those traps were. We may not have known what he was saying when he said it, but our fathers, even the absent father, somehow has let us know what those traps are. Which is an excellent point. So there's kind of a paradox here, which is a real Jungian paradox, and that is the wound will heal itself.
And of course, out of the wound comes the gift.
Exactly.
And it's
Precisely.
the difference between macho and the wild man, or what we're trying to do, is the acceptance of the pain and the dealing with the pain and the wound that life
Precisely.
gives you, as compared to denying it and acting it out on everybody.
Precisely. If you're suffering your machismoism, you're not acting it out. You're acting it in, and that's what suffering is. Is I will act it in, and that means I will turn it back around and I will reflect it back on me. What's important here? That I roll up my sleeves 2 or 3 notches. You know, and asking that question about what's important for me in all of that. if you're acting it out, you're really not suffering it. I think a lot of men get caught up sexually that way, and I don't think just men, but women, is we cannot suffer our own sexuality, so we go out and we end out, that's what addiction is, in a sense. It's this acting out to make sure that it never stays home long enough to start building some heat. Let that fire start building, that transformative fire.
You know, that it's interesting what we're talking about, in that a lot of people have a tremendously hard time being alone with themselves.
Precisely.
You know, actually not turn that, to go home and not turn that, and not turn the television on. Well, we have I'll tell you what, you can call in at 292-3263, and we'd love to hear from you. We have the folks at Parentcraft each show now do a little tip on raising youngsters, and I would urge any of you to get in touch with Parentcraft. I'm sure they're in the phone book. Probably one of the best. The gentleman that called in before on spending time, I'd be willing to bet you 10 to 1 that Parentcraft has some tips for you on working with your youngsters and making your home life a little bit more effective, and getting some of the things done in our lives we all want to do. So let's go see what Parentcraft did for us.
When your child misbehaves, act immediately if possible. Draw your child close to you and remain calm. Keep it as short and private as possible. For example, show your disapproval by saying firmly, "It's not okay for you to leave your skateboard out at night."
Welcome back to the Men's Forum section of the Channel 99 Review, Public Access Television, Channel 27, Albuquerque, New Mexico, on a fine spring day. We're speaking with Mr. Mark Ferriegel, and we're getting toward the end of the program. So what I'd like to do, Mark, is ask you if you had one piece of advice for men that you would like to put out there. If you wanted to go ahead and do that, that would be absolutely grand.
One piece of advice. In a nutshell, I would advise men to stop asking women how they should be and start asking other men.
So stop asking women and start asking men.
And start asking men.
You know, it's important, I think, that we realize that women can't meet all of our needs, and that men's groups provide a tremendous forum and support for us to be able to learn how to, definitely got some problems to work on out there. If someone wanted to call you on these workshops, what do you know what number they would call off the top?
Yes, 266-0738.
And you guys have another one forming not too far in the future, don't you?
May 13th, we are starting. This will be ongoing. What we're going to do, there's been a few changes. We're going to ask that people commit to 10 weeks. At that point, if you want to stay, you can stay for as long as you want. What we will do is go through, it'll take us about 10 weeks to go through each myth. That way you don't get the same stuff every time.
Right.
Get the Parsifal myth. You'll get, we did the Wild Man the time before that, Bly's Iron John. We're moving from here into the Oedipus myth. So you'll get a different myth. Do a lot of art, like I said.
These are 2-hour sessions,
These
right?
are 2-hour sessions, right.
Be 10 2-hour sessions.
10 2-hour sessions
And
in a
then,
weekend.
and then you guys got to go to the D.H. Lawrence Ranch or whatever it
We've
be.
gone.
And you've, or that's one of the places you've gone to.
That's one of the places we've gone.
And it's an attempt to bring and identify some of the forces at work in your life from unconsciousness into consciousness. Well, I'd like to thank you for being here today, and thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
I enjoyed it. I'm glad somebody finally came and played the drum a little bit. Here we go. I'd like to thank Mark. I'd like to remind our viewers that there are repeat broadcasts of tonight's show on Monday at 1 and Tuesday at 9. We have a current schedule change that's going to be moving to the first and third Sundays of the month in June at 6 p.m. rather than, so we'll be here first and third, and that'll be starting in July. We'll shift to the second and fourth Sundays for the summer. There'll be a 4-week break after Father's Day. The next show will be in 2 weeks. That's Sunday, May 19th. And once again, we don't have a commitment for a guest or the show, but other upcoming features will be June 2nd, 4 weeks from today, new views on reproductive responsibility. We have a male educator from Planned Parenthood for that. June 16th, we will have, which is 6 weeks from today, we will have a special Father's Day program a la Oprah Winfrey. And this is a studio audience, but without the hostility towards men, obviously. We always are looking for viewer invites and comments, and we have an ad in the paper today if you'd like to call about possibly being a guest on the show, or being a guest host, or giving us some input. We would love to have you. And if you check today's paper and give Mike Kruchowski a call, that would be a grand piece of work on your part, and something we'd really like is more input from the community than. The more input, the better, I suppose. And if you're a field producer, you can call or write for production guidelines. We'd be glad to, if you want to film some shorts and send them to us. We're always, as I say, interested in studio qualified assessors, and we invite you to give us a call. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Mike Rivas saying goodbye from the Channel 99 Review and the Men's Forum.